Hey there, I'm Distorted Reality, also known as DR. In this animation breakdown, I'll be going through my thoughts and processes whilst animating the recent video I uploaded called Little Hero Academia Falling Flat. Now if you haven't seen it already, I'm going to have a link down below for you. So before I had anything to work with, I started with a test of the model. Now this is her school uniform. This was later changed, but at the moment I was doing some tests with her. I had a look around and you can't really see it's quite ugly. The model, I didn't like the uniform model that much, and I had to move around, test, see if she was good to animate, the hair animation, just make sure it was all good really. Now, I used bones to move her mouth around, but I changed that later because as I found out, these models are pretty terrible, at least in terms of lip syncing. I'll show you that shortly. But after that, I moved on and I did more tests. This was testing the witch uniform now, and here I'm still using the bones to move her mouth around, but I was basically just seeing if it would look good, because some models have this weird crinkle on the side of them, and if I render this now, I think this is when I got a successful take. Yeah, I was doing lighting tests, making sure like you couldn't see it. I used this thing some of you may know called ambient occlusion. Now without the ambient occlusion, it would look a tad bit more terrifying, but even if I fix the lighting, it's these creases here that you can't really notice with ambient. Sure, it takes longer to render, but I think it comes out with a much nicer result. So moving on, I've got Aqua Test 3 currently, and this is just testing flattening the model, because just because the model exists doesn't mean you should just like flatten it and it'll be fine. Some models, like the Super Mario Odyssey Peach model, don't really oblige to what we want to work. So I made this quick test render of her in a 3D model, and as you'll soon find out, the model I used for the flat echo is completely different. But for here, it was just a test render for the person. Now, I know I'm going quite quickly, but these are kind of the unimportant parts. There wasn't much to say here. I was still using the mouth bones, and yeah, I was doing it the hard way around. It was only later I figured out I could make life much easier on myself. So if I move into the files and move to, not this one, this was a test of another character, which we did end up using. So characters test was the first official, I guess, part of the animation, you could say. So this is me just really setting up the scene, and you can see the project time is about an hour. It's me just messing around trying to get the lighting right, and this is the first time in the environment, and I still had a few signs I didn't delete, like I didn't get rid of this board over here. I just had to make it look nice. But right now it was just putting the characters in the environment, which introduced Ursula here, and testing if they worked in the environment. So after a few quick renders, you know, there's a bit of black here that I could fix. All was good. It's, you know, she's holding a broom and a wand, which obviously she wasn't at certain times in the animation. So I believe here I was still using the mouth bones like an absolute tool, because if I go to her mesh and go to shape keys, she has none. See, the problem with Ursula is that her mouth doesn't really connect very well. This is her teeth. I have to move them separately, and it wasn't for me. See, like, trying to move the mouth, you move her entire chin, she becomes Peter Griffin. So I had to improve that. So we go to character test 2. This is when I got a little smart. So I decided to add shape keys. So if you look on the right now, I've now got shape keys that do exactly what I want, and I can animate them freely, but I have to do the hassle of moving all these separately. This saved me so much time. If it wasn't for that, this animation would have never come out. So Akko over here is still just smiling away, like just testing her environment. She doesn't have any shape keys. So this was about after 40 minutes just making shape keys for the characters, which is quite easy, but it can be time consuming. So in the final characters test is when I finally fix Akko's face and give her like proper blinking, opening her mouth, but I hadn't actually given her proper like A, O, you know, all the vowel sounds. I just open mouth, open smile, the simple stuff, you know. This all didn't exist, I had to do this myself. Whilst Ursula, I believe, is pretty much complete at this point. Yeah, she's got a E-A-O's, and I believe if I set it to blink, yeah, if I scroll up here, see if I can notice it. You can barely notice it here, but actually part of the skin rips, because where her eyebrows are, there is nothing behind it. Her eyebrows are part of her face, after all. And I didn't notice this till later in the animation. I was like, oh god, like there's all these seams here. I don't know how I didn't notice it. So this was fixed in a later version of the animation, but obviously it was fixed in the final render as well. So as you can see, like I had to do the blinking myself, pretty self-explanatory. So now I'll quickly discuss how I did the flattening for Akko. Now those who have seen my tutorials may be familiar with this method. I used a cloth. So here's just a few different saves I had of her. I'd put her in a position, like this is when she landed, she's a bit shocked there. I put her in a position, and then I'd render it like that in, I believe I do it 4K just to make it sure it's clean, yeah. And then just apply it to a plane, so a 2D object in a 3D environment, slap that texture on, and call that a model. And it's pretty nice, it's pretty convenient, and I think I ended up photoshopping that bit out. But yeah, it's much easier than use 3D model, and the person did request specifically that they wanted it 2D because the 3D version where she was flat earlier, I believe it was this one. Yeah, it's like there was a bit of 3D and they didn't like that, so I mean 2D is the way to go. So starting off, Project Akko 1 blend. This was this is when I actually started animating. I made it go down and it's like saying all right. And there's a few things missing here, like this is where I just started. It says about 5.5 hours in, that's after all the testing. It was technically all one save file, but I saved as to continue. So that's how long I'd spent already. Here, I believe she's lip synced alright. Yeah. But her hat doesn't move, like, it doesn't kind of bounce, and this broom doesn't have the, I can say ribbon, like moving a bit more freely as it does in the final version. And this was, I tried to make it look as nice as possible. This one was just starting out. She looks over, looks at Ursula, and here's something that's actually unused. Originally in the storyboard, she was gonna do this. She was gonna do thumbs up with a smile. So the problem with glasses is that the transparency in Blender looks weird. So I'll just normally move it to layer 2. Oh, if the program wants to respond, I think it just crashed. Nope. Nope, we're good. Yeah, that's the thing with Blender. Save often. Oh my god, if you're gonna use Blender, please save often. That's why I've got so many files. So I moved these glasses to file 2, layer 2, and just show you the actual thing. Yeah, she's all happy. Oh, wrong one. Let's try and get a clean version of that. So I hide the bones. This is what it would have looked like originally. But he said it looked quite goofy, so decided to change it. And then, that's all there is for now. It kind of stopped there, that's as far as I got, about 5:35. So, moving on to number 2. This is the, not next scene actually, this is when it got another change if I move the start frame. So now, if I quickly just hide these, and remove the glasses, she used to nod as well. She's, you know, accepting nod, and you might notice in final animation she still does this kind of nodding kind of thing, but says need to focus. That was a last minute change. In fact, that's as far as I got on that, and then she's not actually in a proper position here. But if I go to the 2, but really it's an after credit, so actually 16, because there's 15 in total. This has majority of the file. This is when I actually fix it, and she says focus only on a task. So that's this is also when I'd added a little. Had I? No, I think this was actually an earlier, still earlier version. But in number 3, let's move on. This is when I'd actually put her on the broom. So moving on to part 3, or part 3, the third save. This was quite interesting to animate. It was quite tough because the secret to this, to keeping her attached to the broom, is that it is attached to her right arm, and that makes it fun to animate. Sure does. Yeah, but floating her up, I was just quite proud of this. This is not fully finished yet. You can see she kind of just stiffens out, and that's it. Not much happened. In fact, not even Ursula's moving. So this was an earlier version of it. I think this was a test render to see how it looked. So moving on to number 4. This is quite further on. This is when I'd got Ursula to move, and here she didn't originally shake. Like, there was not much shake here. I mean, it's quite subtle there, but before I was like, you know, I need to add that. So it's just adding the little things that improve it, I find. One thing that was really fun to animate was this hat falling here. So when you're slightly off screen, this is what would actually happen. She'd fly up and then kind of just stiffen out because no point in animating. The hat instantly comes off and it starts to come down. And you know it cuts off here. But originally I was going to have it so it kept going down. I unlock the keyframes. So it would just flop down to the floor, so it would look a bit more like this. But I decided against it because I thought it just went on a little too long for what I was liking. So obviously I was just looking down at the hat like, oh my god. Which leads us to number 5 when I started using the A3, A4. That's the, it basically just meant the 3rd page of the storyboard, 4th page of the storyboard, things like that. So here is the first scene where she's in the air. And actually I did quite a bit here. Like, this is quite a long save. I'm glad it didn't corrupt or anything. So you obviously got her saying, oh no. But while that's happening, the hat is still falling out. I never removed that. And here, this is a kind of fun. I really like this because I'd never animated something that was off ground. So having something that had to feel like it had weight to it in the sky was really interesting. So here, she is still attached to the right arm. It's the same broom, so she can like, fly around, whatever. Trying to like mess with the, I guess, skirt to try and be dynamic in the air. These clouds only move in this scene. They were originally in the intro scene when it's panning down, but the guy said, nah, don't need that. So they only appeared here. Originally, I had no idea how I was going to do this. I was thinking, how am I going to make her fly up into the air? I am so proud of this section. I think in the final animation it's one of my favourite scenes where she's like dangling. I mean, it's not perfect, but I am quite proud of it. And here you can see like the ribbons don't really fall here. Those were kind of like last minute quality of life things. I wanted to try and make her hair as dynamic as possible though. So in most scenes you'll see that it's going mental. You can't really see the the back of her hair there, so it's fine not to animate. That was quite simple enough. It was as simple as just animating that. And then she starts to fall, which she actually like teleports up slightly, but well, hey, that's animation for you. You can move things wherever you want. Audience would never know. So as soon as she starts falling there, it cuts to this, but that's as far as I got animating. So this is about 15, just about 16 hours in. And then that leads to number 6. So, number 6 is when Ursula is chasing after Echo, freaking out. But there doesn't seem to be much going on here. What? Oh, that is because I'm slightly ahead. So she falls here, and not much change. Like, this is all pretty much one take done, you know. She's like gonna start running, and then here she actually starts running. Move this back. So here she's running, and obviously nothing. The camera shakes, but obviously nothing is on screen. So why bother animating something that's not going to be seen? and just like her legs here, just gliding across the floor, kind of find it funny. And then it pans to where the flat echo would be, which I hadn't implemented yet, so nowhere to be found. And that was quite a short one, that was just a quick panel. So then that leads to number 7, where, here we go, we've actually got progress now. So I added the echo and the hat. So I believe when she's running, you can actually see the hat a little bit in the camera, just quite quickly. So I added that in, and blinks a couple times, and the flat echo is there. And the addition of the broom, which it does look rough. I mean, you may have saw that and thinking, ouch, that looks a bit bad. But gravity is not my strong point. I mean, in animation, making something feel like it's there, like it's a gravity, like it's an object in the world is really tough. And if you can master it, you know, you've got my respect, because it's not the easiest thing. So this just leaves with us looking down at Echo, which is actually quite accurate because the camera is taken from Echo's perspective. So, I mean, yeah, you basically got the perfect position there, but she does look down to the right, which would mean she's looking at the crotch, which is a bit weird, but hey, the audience doesn't know that. As far as we know, she's to the right. So that was a bit backwards with me, but then that just leads to the next one of, I should mention quickly, as say the plane, it's literally just a plane. Don't think it's even double-sided. It's just, yeah, a one-sided plane, so texture applies on both sides. Just put on the floor, and she is stretched a little bit just because of the perspective. Here, she looks normal, but if I return her to normal size, she'd look much smaller than she's supposed to be. I just do that there. Like, she looks a bit squashed. I mean, from a different axes. So that's why I stretched her out a bit. So, moving on to number 8. This is when I had to get a bit experimental. I believe this is when I had to animate a mouth with textures. Not the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. In fact, what makes it hard is that it doesn't appear in the preview. It only does in the render. So here she's got a mouth open. This is not a high quality render because I had to keep rendering it. The legs didn't they look too close together, so I separated them a bit, but really just makes a thick Ursula. I mean, it's not really realistic, but it looks nice in the render, and I keep emphasizing it, but it is true. If the audience ain't gonna see it, who cares? It looks funny, like looking back on it, but that's about it. So after animating her mouth a bit, say Professor, I'm so sorry and all that, that's all it was. This entire scene was just animating her mouth. She doesn't move at all in this. So I also really enjoy how the shadow goes over. Like, shadows can be a bit of a problem when it comes to planes because they're a square, but by some magic I made it apply to just the texture, and the box didn't overlay shadow. Just because it's transparent doesn't mean it won't overlay shadow. See, like I lift up, there's a shadow. It's a nightmare to work with. So moving on to number 9. This was a long project to work on, and you can see the megabytes are going up, or megabits, whatever. 24 hours into it now, nearly 25. This is really far in. This is when, yeah, this is, I did a long save for this one. So say, Professor, I'm so sorry. Head that back a little bit. And here, trying to add this green light is a nightmare. Blender Internal is the worst for lighting, like specifically like close-up lighting. I'm pretty sure there's something I could have done that I didn't know of that would have made it way easier. But in the render, it doesn't look that great. It's just got a green hue, which is all I can really do with my knowledge of Blender. Anyway, I'm sure there's a better way. Cycles render, on the other hand, which if I rendered in that, the animation wouldn't be out till next year. Would have handled it perfectly. So I made Ursula's hand like wave and stuff. I don't do well with hands. Like animating a hand is like animating an entire another human being on a tiny. It's like a sock puppet. There's a little human being on the human being, and it's just there's so many bones to work with. It's not fun, but it looks really nice when it's done. So here was where one of my personal favorite parts to animate was, which I guess it goes without saying, but it's when I got to use the cloth physics. And here she gets yanked off, but it's quickly cut off, and that's to show that like she goes up and then climbs up like that, like being waved up. But the guy wanted to have two versions of this version, where it cuts off there, and the longer version, which I'll show you in a bit, where she goes off screen, and that's the one he chose in the end. So here she goes up, and then I'm quite proud of that because the way this was remain green, oh god, yeah, that's the problem with having one mesh, you can get some pretty scary results. The way you kept this green was this spotlight that's specifically stayed with the light at all times. I animated it along with it. But here's an interesting thing. So the original animation had a where she rolled up this way and was face down in her own body. Now it was like this way for quite a while, until about like 5 hours before I'd finished or started rendering. He said like you could do it the other way around, and I had to reanimate this bit and this bit here. But it was fine because I think that was definitely a wise choice. It made the animation look so much better when you could see her face. Here you can see this is obviously unfinished. You get to see the inner workings of animation, how simple things start as. I've got the initial landing, so I know where I'm going to land, and then I can move the body around it. Moving this wasn't fun because it's tied to what's called a NURB path. And if you move that around without the mesh, things can get a little messy. So you have to move both of them at the same time, and because of the way the center is, the rotation is funky. It wasn't pleasant to work with. So with 9 out of the way, let's move on to 10. So this is the seventh part of the storyboard. Now it's 8 pages in total, and this is when I believe the cloth physics is a bit broken here because I think I was redoing it. Yeah, she was getting dragged off at this point. You can kind of see the cutout because I made a specific collision mesh instead of just having a square, so it looked nicer. That's why her legs kind of come together in the final instead of just remaining apart. And here, she actually still rolls up backwards. I believe this is just me. Yeah, she has, like, she's looking towards, she has much more motion. And, say, a little more practice on her. And the throw I put in myself because I thought it was kind of nice to showing how she's just like, just a rolled up cloth now, basically. And I thought that was nice. And then she kind of just freezes, like, what do I do now? And it was kind of just refining this section here. This section went through like the most changes, this cloth followed by roll up. So in 11, once I find it, this is still A7. This is when what was I doing in this section? I believe this is the same, it was just changed a little bit. Rolled in, this may be when, yeah. This was a tiny little addition where she looks towards the broom to start heading towards it, but here she originally was just going to look at it and then basically teleport to the broom with her arm. I decided to change that. I was like, she needs to have a bit more motion to show that she actually go in there. So 11 was quite small, and 12 was the big change. It's actually called 12 change. I didn't do that on purpose for the point of this video. But this was 28 hours in just exactly, and ignore the T-pose in Ursula because if I go back, yeah, this is when I actually decided to change it. Now the roll-up, the NURB path, goes upside down, so now she twists up the other way. And I really, really like this change. One continuity error that kind of bugged me, but it was a bit late to change, and it would take ages to re-render, was that she's facing up here, but facing down here. So I've officially ruined the video for you. But maybe the magic wand twists her around, believe what you want. It's off screen. So it's on, I think most of it's the same, except now she walks towards it, and you'll see that Echo bounces around a little bit. kind of like rolls in around her hands, and I thought that was pretty nice. And then this is the final scene, you know, T-posing Ursula, and there's 2 brooms. This was a late addition. I had to go through the entire render to make sure it didn't appear until this point, because I had to add it now. But she gets her own broom, which is bound to her hand, I believe. Yep, just like with Echo. So, this is getting towards the end now. If I go to 13, I've got This Is It Luigi. If you understand that inside joke, oh my god, I have mad respect for you. I was going through the keyframes to make sure everything was smooth enough. Like, it looks like quite a lot. It's not that much. I guess it's like, what, 3,000 keyframes? I mean, more than that. It's 3,000 frames worth of keyframes. Like all characters, 2 characters. But here, she actually didn't have the. Oh gosh, she didn't actually have Echo in her hands yet. In fact, I don't think this bit's animated. I believe I was just putting her into place because I didn't know how the dress was gonna work. So she kind of goes through the broom. I'll leave that up to imagination. But originally, from the start, she was just gonna hold it under the shoulder, and I couldn't for the life of me get this dress to work. So I ended up making it look like she's got her knees up, so it does go in front. It's an optical illusion. Like, this is going through, but you can't see that because of the angle. And of course, she's holding the broom like that. This took a while to set up, but I mean, it took half an hour to set up apparently. It's getting those complex poses. It's like very specific. It's so satisfying when you pull it off. It just makes it worth it. And I think at this point, yeah, this has a keyframe at this point to make it like move, make it windy or like change direction, whatever. And I think that's reflected on at the start. Let me check. So yeah, so if I put this to the start and zoom in a little bit, you can see that once I remove this, just to make it a bit easier to see, she has a bit more dynamic on a ribbon, and with her hat, I believe. Yep, so that bounces a little bit. I noticed when I was looking for references from the show, anime, whatever, their hats are actually quite dynamic. They're not just stiff witch cut-out hats. They actually have a bit of movement to them. And I also did the same with the belts in a few scenes. I'm not sure where you'd see it, but oh yeah, I think with the belt scene you can see it bouncing around. Just a subtle addition to make it look nicer. So 14, I believe is when I finished it. Yep, this is when the initial final was decided on. So I drag her up, put her on there, and there you go. She wisps away, camera pans up, and that's the end. Just short of 3,000 frames. That would have been great. So this was the initial final design. So what do we have here? We got a few things changed, but I still believe at this point, I'll just check that now. I believe she still nods. Yeah, so even at this point, about well, it says 56 hours. That's because I use this to render with. I think my total animating time was about 30 hours, but it took about 26 hours to render, and it shouldn't, judged by the quality it looks like. But as you can see, it takes a bit of time. One is because I used ambient occlusion, and that takes much longer to render, but it looks so much nicer. Like, I really like these shadows. And 2, my computer is a bit garbage, and you think that's a bit counterproductive doing animations, but this is the life I want to live, so I'll make do. So with that, there was only one more change, which was called, well, there was 2 more changes. There was Alt Flop, which was when I incorporated the long one, the one where she is pulled like fully off screen. I kind of like the fold. You can't really see him in the animation, but I love like the folds, kind of like show how much cloth she is. And then after that, the only last change was Twirl Alt, which was altered very recently. Actually, it was like a last minute. Oh no, this was actually different. This is not the last one. This is when I was testing, like the back version of her, basically. Like, she'd flop up and go backwards and roll up like that, and then that way she'd be facing forward still. I mean, here it's still normal, but I was thinking, wait, how am I gonna... I had to work out how do I make a twist up and show a face while still looking forwards. I mean, that was just a matter of doing a 180, but not that way. That wouldn't work. So the only thing I had to change then was the final version, which was but released after 15.16, and that's when it says we need to focus. And that's pretty much it. It was really fun to work on. It took, I mean, you saw it took technically about 56 hours, plus I guess an extra half an hour for this, to animate and render. So you got to take time, what test renders, what, I imagine it was about 30 hours of animating. For a minute 40, I think I was slow. I think I could have been faster, but I wanted to make sure this was one of my highest quality animations so far. And I might be looking back on this now thinking, what's he thinking about? This animation is terrible. And maybe it is, but I think I'm improving, and that's all that matters really. Just as long as I'm, you know, making people happy in the community. So that's it. I'm just really proud of this piece, and that's why I wanted to talk about how I did things, like just explaining each scene, showing, I guess, deleted scenes in a way. So thank you for joining me. Keep on creating, everyone.